Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'll just start by answering, and then my colleagues here can join in. First thing to say, of course, is that we know that there have been signing statements in the United States that we can trace back to President James Monroe. So they simply aren't new to this administration. Moreover, this administration, interestingly enough, has issued fewer signing statements than did President Clinton. That also is somewhat surprising. And so what that reflects, I should say, in parentheses, is that we have tried to look quite seriously at these signing statements. I think the real issue with signing statements, they cover a lot of things. I mean, most of them can be classified as rhetorical signing statements. They're simply the kind of thing that we know that presidents say when a bill is written into law. So you're thanking the various supporters, you're reaching out to various people that are going to be affected by the legislation. They're wonderful photo opportunities. You can share pens with a whole range of people. So they serve that purpose. Other times, they serve a purpose in which the president, consistent with the statute, is directing the executive branch how he wants that statute put in place. So to that extent, they can be seen more as almost administrative or implementation documents or directives. Where they really have become controversial, and I think absolutely deservedly so in this administration, are the number of them in which the president in essence is saying, I have constitutional objections to parts of this legislation. And as a result of those constitutional objections, I am going to, in my status as unitary executive, unitary power over the executive branch, I will decide which parts of the statute we're going to implement and under what conditions we will pursue the implementation. Now those sorts of issues are issues that I hope we'll talk about later today when the constitutional experts are up here to discuss them. There, I think, is where the nub of the real concern is. There is where the nub of parts of the Bush legacy may be. Now, having said that, that's also going to raise the question, well, can't Mr. Obama simply come into office and, in effect, take back the signing statements that are at issue? In principle, yes, he could. And he may well in certain kinds of instances. But I'm afraid I agree with my colleague, Andy Rudalevich, that in this new era of what he calls the new imperial presidency, we would not expect any president to voluntarily give up very much power explicitly. Would I expect President-elect Obama or President Obama to act in the way that President Bush did? Absolutely not. The main reason is that there would be a real backlash were he to do so. Is he likely to reverse all of these for his successor presidents? I don't think so. I think there will be a real argument within the White House counsel's office and in the Office of Legal Counsel over what to do with a panoply of executive orders, of pending rules, of executive agreements, but certainly with some of those signing statements. I think finally that this is an issue that, yes, political scientists ought to look at more frequently. They got the most attention because the Boston Globe reporter, Charlie Savage, got a hold of Christopher Kelly's dissertation at Miami University of Ohio. And that's where he reported on signing statements. But they really haven't gotten very much attention. Even though I said, when President Bush finally said, well, okay, we'll allow that no torture amendment into the Defense Reauthorization Bill, it was obvious what was going to happen. That there would be a signing statement issued within 48 hours, I think it was within 24 hours, that would say, I am not going to enforce all parts of this statute. That's a long-winded way of saying I think you are absolutely right, but it also is a question that the American public and the next president have to confront as well, I think.
One more question?
Yeah.
As a follow-up to that question,
certainly.
The Constitution allows the president to sign a law or veto a law.
Right.
It does not allow the president to pick and choose
That's right.
which parts of the law he's going
Right.
to enforce. Can you speak to that?
Well, that's clearly the constitutional as well as the political concern. Remember that presidents never vetoed laws unless they had constitutional objections until Andrew Jackson. So this notion of the veto being there for a president to protect presidential and his branch's functions and tasks has been there for a long time. What you're suggesting is what many other people say, which is if you don't like the law, Mr. President, lobby against those provisions while it's still being discussed in Congress, otherwise veto it. This president has chosen not to do that. Now then one asks, okay, why isn't there a kind of response? Why not go to court? Well, why not go to court?
Actually, we had somebody over here who already had a microphone. This will be the last question.
Okay, but the final thing I'm going to say about why not go to court, do you have standing? It's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to do. Yeah.
Hi, Eric Patterson from Georgetown University, and I spent the last year as a White House fellow, so
Good.
This is quite interesting.
So you should be up here, please.
And then previously at the State Department as a visiting scholar. My question is, and I wish Dr. Bush was here as well, is about how things work at the working level and how the president affects that. So maybe a question to both of you. First of all, we've heard a lot about kind of cabinet level and inner workings of the White House. What about, Dr. Hult, at the GS level and at the SES level? In other words, the bulk of people who make up these organizations, how effective, from your standpoint, was the president in having his agenda happen there? And on the national security side, the question I ask is also one about implementation. So not in terms of organizational structures or cabinet levels, but how effective do you feel that the president was in getting his agenda items to happen through the DoD civilian bureaucracy, the National Security Council lower bureaucracy, as well as embedding that in our relations with other countries like NATO?
Okay. You want to take national security first?
Oh, you can go first, actually.
Well, I will cede to my colleague here on the national security side. I'll just say a few things in the executive branch bureaucracy. Again, this is the problem that we have in terms of gathering certain kinds of information. I have done work in previous administrations with various kinds of surveys of senior level, GS 15 and above, some SES, senior executive service, and so on. And we started doing that in Reagan, continued it through first Bush, and again through Clinton. This administration will not allow us access to those people. So that's going to temper what I have to say. What it looks as though we see in most administrations is that the administrations pay the most careful attention to a strategic set of agencies. And so, for example, you may well see that the Bush agenda and Bush priorities was given a lot more attention at places like the Environmental Protection Agency than it might have been elsewhere in the executive branch. And that's simply a strategic kind of decision. In those agencies, the politicization is really critical to consider. We are not talking about cabinet members. Cabinet members are the least important people in the executive branch when it comes to the presidential appointment authority, at least in my opinion. The real story is when you get down into the sub-cabinet and the Schedule C appointees and the political parts of the senior executive service. That's where you can see if an administration is pursuing this strategically. That's where you begin to see some real impact of the presidential policy strategies. So that's where I would look to find a lot more of the Bush administration impact. Final thing I will say is that Dave Lewis and others have looked at Office of Personnel Management data, and they find that in this presidency, like its predecessors, there are very clear differences in the kinds of agencies that they pay most attention to in terms of the policy-based ideological vetting that they do. And if that's the case, then we would expect then in agencies that are high up in the president's agenda, there would be significant impact, which is consistent, I think, with what you're asking about.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, since we're running a little long, I'll say simply on my end that 60 years after Truman, the Defense Department is still learning to get together and get along, and the White House is still learning how to implement policy through DoD. And we're going to see that in the Homeland Security Department for some time to come. Forever, right?
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank my three distinguished colleagues for an excellent first panel. Thank you so much.